Hey guys, Brad here from Scooter Street. Today I want to talk about variator tuning, but specifically an element of variator tuning that we haven't really talked a whole lot about before, and that is shims. Now I have a shim just here. These can be really useful as a very inexpensive and quick way to change the tune of your transmission, particularly useful if you're maybe doing some performance tuning or some troubleshooting as well. They can be really useful for in trying to troubleshoot why your transmission's acting a particular way and how to fix it. So to show you how these work and why they're actually a really great little tuning as well as troubleshooting tool, I have this Vespa S50 behind me we happen to have in the shop today. I'm going to pop the transmission cover off, pull the variator off and show you how these work. Then we'll talk about sort of why they work and maybe sort of the best times that you would perhaps use them, the best applications, because these things are so much cheaper than changing your rear spring, your contra spring, or buying a couple of different sets of rollers. So it can be a really efficient and inexpensive way to change the tune of your transmission. Okay, so covers are off, everything's out of the way. I've actually split a spare rear pulley that we had laying around the shop, so we can sort of almost have an X-ray view into the transmission and get a much better understanding of what's happening inside here, so that then when we get to our shim, we have a sort of a better idea of why it makes the changes that it does. So say we're sitting at idle. We've started the scooter up, we're sitting there, haven't taken off yet. The belt's gonna be sitting something like this, small at the front, big at the rear, okay? So we start to take off, start to accelerate. As we start to move, what happens is the crank starts to spin, which forces the rollers inside the basket of the variator to slide up their ramps, causing the basket to slide outwards on the shaft. Now, because the outer pulley is fixed, it doesn't move, it just spins. As these two pulleys come together, they get closer, they essentially squeeze the belt. Now, because both of these pulleys are conical faced and the belt is a V-belt, the belt only has one place it can go, and so it does that, it goes out. So what we end up with as you accelerate up to your top speed, the belt's gonna be looking more like this. Big on the front, small on the rear. Inside the rear pulley, there's actually a spring, that's our contra spring that squeezes the two rear pulleys together. As the belt is forced out by the variator basket, the spring compresses, allows these two plates to come apart, which allows the belt to come down into the bottom of the rear pulley, and that's where we get our highest gearing. It's gonna look something like this. Now, the weight of the rollers and the strength of the rear contra spring are kind of always fighting each other. They're always ideally in a bit of an equilibrium. So the rollers will be the correct weight and the rear contra spring will be the correct stiffness to allow the bike to operate right in its optimal zone. What you want is for the bike to rev up to its peak power, peak torque, and stay there as the gearing changes around that. Now, coming to our shims, because this system relies pretty much entirely on squeezing the belt together, right? On the distance between the inner and the outer face. If we put a shim, say in here, say this is a 0.5 mil shim, I'm not actually sure what it is, I'm just guessing, say it's 0.5 mil. When we put our outer pulley on, assuming the belt is in there, those two faces are now going to be 0.5 mil further apart at all times. Now, if they're 0.5 mil further apart, that means that the belt is going to be sitting lower at all times, effectively reducing the gearing, having pretty similar effect to lightening the rollers. Now, it gets a little bit complicated with rollers in that there's sort of a window of sort of light and heavy, where within that window, regardless of what weight you have, the belt will still go all the way down and still all the way up. So you're not going to sacrifice any low end or any top end. If you go too heavy, the belt won't sit generally all the way back down into the bottom of the variator, so you sort of lose some lower gearing. And if the rollers are too light, sort of vice versa, the belt now, they don't have enough force to force the belt all the way up to the top, so you lose some sort of high gearing. That's assuming that you haven't changed your contra spring. Now, when it comes to the shim, however, what you've essentially done is permanently separated those two faces from each other by 0.5 mil. So in a sense, you've restricted the top speed because you have limited the ability of those two faces to come together as close as they would have. So say at your top speed previously, the belt was all the way up the top. Well, now it might be just slightly off the top because those two faces can't come together as close as they used to and force the belt up as high as they used to be. Now, it is again a bit of a balancing act. You know, one sort of 0.5 mil shim might reduce your top speed by say 2 k's an hour, but it might significantly increase your bottom end. Now, if you're just interested in getting to say 80 kilometers an hour really quickly, you're not interested in going faster than that, your bike's doing 85 right now, well, a shim might be a good option for you because you can put that shim in, get to 80 faster, but still be able to get to 80. You've only sort of decreased your top speed within a range that you're still happy with. Now, why would you choose to use a shim instead of changing a contra spring or changing your rollers? Well, these shims come in a little pack, generally a few of them, but you can put a few in there and it's very, very cost effective. A pack of shims is, you know, a few dollars compared to, you know, say you want 2 or 3 sets of rollers, that's gonna cost you, you know, probably coming up around that $100 mark. These shims, you have a bunch of, you know, say your pack comes with 5 or so, you have 5 different options, you know, a range of 5 different shims that you can change the tuning of your transmission, and it costs you a fraction of what several sets of rollers would cost. And they are so easy to change, really, really quick and easy to change, even quicker and easier to change than doing your rollers. Now, I also mentioned troubleshooting. Now, one instance that I have personally experienced, having put a very high performance single ring cylinder kit in one of my previous scooters, having an issue with the bike bogging and sort of trying to work out, is this a tuning issue in terms of fueling, or is this a transmission issue? Now, as I mentioned, you know, when you put performance parts on the bike, generally you need the bike to rev harder. Now, a single ring performance cylinder kit needs to rev very, very hard to make power. So in that particular instance, I actually found shims to be incredibly useful because what I was able to do is isolate where the problem is to save myself some time on the tuning. So what I did is I put a couple of shims in the front of my Variator like this, which essentially had the same effect as putting very, very light rollers in the bike, allowing me to isolate whether the bogging issue was fuel related or transmission related. Now, in the case of that particular bike, what I needed was an overrange transmission and a very stiff contra spring. It was actually a transmission issue, not a fueling issue. But putting those shims in there massively improved it and told me straight away, all right, here's where I need to train my focus. The issue is the transmission, not the fueling. Especially when you're doing a big build like that, like I was, you're sort of starting from scratch in many respects, and it can be a little bit frustrating and sort of unnerving taking the bike out for a ride, not knowing where your tune is, especially if the bike's bogging so hard that it won't actually rev up to give you an accurate read on the plug as to whether it's rich or lean. So these shims were so useful in sort of allowing me to nut the issue down to being in the transmission, so I could get that sorted so the bike would actually rev enough that I could get an accurate read on the plug and tune the jet. Hopefully after watching that, you sort of gain some more understanding of both how your CVT works, but also some different methods of being able to tune it to get sort of the desired effect that you want. Anyway, if you found that video useful, please help us out by hitting that like button. Every little bit of support helps and we do appreciate it. And as always, if you have any questions, please let us know in the comments. We endeavor to answer every single one. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that sub button so you don't miss out on any more videos we have coming out just like this one. Anyway, thanks again for watching. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.